Is there an Omaha, Texas? Hey, Athena, I just saw your question in the chat about the PowerPoint. We will give you all a heads up here in a minute that all the resources that we're sharing with y'all today are on the Accelerated Instruction webpage. The recording and the slides will be up there, hopefully later on today after we wrap up this call. Hempstead, Nacogdoches. Got some feedback that folks may not be able to hear me. Colby or Zach, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can? Excellent.
Yes.
Holly, I think let us know if you can't hear us. Also, just folks that are in the chat, will you just, yeah, thanks, Pamela. Okay, excellent. Pamela, I'm assuming that you're talking about. Tyler, El Paso, thank you, Holly Salas. Thanks, Allison. Crystal. Mission, Texas, Grand Saline. Great town. Hi, Lisa. Great to see you. Folks in Abernathy. We got some West Texas folks in here. This is excellent. So it is 10 o'clock, the top of the hour. We are thrilled that y'all are spending part of your day today with us. The topic of this conversation today is accelerated instruction, and we're jazzed to talk about it with you. This is we've seen so much progress in the state over the past few years. There are just so many great examples of excellent accelerated instruction opportunities that are happening across the state. Many of those you'll see today in our conversation. So just absolutely thrilled that y'all are joining us today. With us today leading, you have a few members of our team that are listed kind of as panelists here. We're going to do our best to make sure that Q&A is fully functioning, and we make sure that we give y'all as many answers as we possibly can today. It looks like the chat function is just available to come to us as hosts and panelists. So if you can, just make sure you take all your questions through the Q&A function so that we can respond to all other folks that are on this call. My name is Andrew Hodge. I'm the Associate Commissioner of System Innovation here at TEA. Has seen a lot of friendly names and familiar names over the throughout the chat. So just excited to see y'all again today. I'm joined by my colleague, Colby Self. Colby, you want to say hi to folks?
Yes, glad to be here. Thank you for joining us. Looks like from all over the state and some beyond. So thank you for joining us today.
Excellent, folks. And so over the course of the next hour or so, we're going to focus on a few things. And so if you look to the left on this slide and just confirm, and folks can see my side, if you can just drop that in the chat, just give us a little thumbs up there to make sure our tech is flowing properly. Thanks, Aaron. I think we're good. Thanks. Raising your hand is a better option there. Thank you. We're about to get, all the thumbs up. Thank you all very much. There's a lot of good, really positive affirmation for us on a Thursday morning. We appreciate it from you. Over the course of the next hour or so, we're going to spend some time doing this welcome that we're doing right now. We want to dig into learning acceleration, really focus on why we're here. A lot of really great research show that a few different strategies have a really big bang for our buck. One of those is high impact tutoring, as Colby's team has been leading for the past few years, since HB 4545 came out, and there's some other ones as well. So we want to dig into the research as well, but we do know that folks are on this call largely to learn more about, hey, what are the accelerated instruction requirements in the state of Texas, and how did HB 1416 change that? At a high level, we'll say that 1416 has incorporated a lot of feedback that we in the legislature received from you all over the course of the past couple of years. And so hopefully some of the changes will make sure that you have, make sure that we as a state are still operating in line with research, but still kind of removing some of the barriers that we've heard from y'all that may have been more burdensome on folks. So excited to dig into HB 1416 here in a minute. And then and then we'll be able to actually dig into some resources that are available on our webpage. That will be left behind. Y'all can access that whenever you want. And again, as I mentioned, the slides and the recording will be available for y'all on the webpage as well. We're going to wrap up with an exit ticket and some next steps, also with a plea to y'all to send us what you've used. What is helpful, that was a helpful tool, resource guys, again, stuck in that you've used in the field to help your district implement some of these practices so that we can review those as a team, work with you, and turn around and share those back with folks across the state. A few housekeeping FYIs before we get started. The Q&A function is open, so please drop your questions into the Q&A box. That is where we're able to answer questions. And that also helps us kind of collect it a little bit better, so that we can turn around, take any new questions that we're getting and put them into our FAQ to make sure that those are kind of memorialized for folks in the future. As I mentioned, this recording and these slides will be available. They will be available on the Accelerated Instruction website, webpage. If y'all want to go ahead and go to that webpage, we're going to be spending probably half our time today on that webpage. So it's a good source for y'all to go to, so that you can kind of look through some of our resources. We've tried to make this as webpage based as possible so that you are able to look at the same resources that we'll be going through later today. And then, of course, with any questions that we're unable to get to today, we got a team of folks that's super excited to connect with you and ready and eager to help. So reach out to accelerated.instruction@ta.texas.gov with any questions. So with that, we'd love to get started and kind of want to reground in where we are as a state. And we know it's no secret to anybody on this call of the hardship that COVID caused with a lot of our students and a lot of our systems, and even some of us personally as well. We did see a rebound after COVID in regards to math and RLA scores in the state. So you see that kind of bump with RLA kind of move back to a similar trajectory that we were on pre-COVID. Math notes not so much, but still did see a bump there. And so we know that there's been a lot of work to ensure that our students are getting back on track. But we know that there's still a lot more that we can do. And that's part of why we're here today, is talk through some of the ways in which we can help collectively as a field to make sure that we are doing what's right by kids. Colby, I do want to just double check before we go into this. Are you seeing the slide that says, how do we accelerate student learning?
Yes, sir. I am.
Awesome. Thank you. So we know typically in a school year, we expect a student, we know that, so I think back to my classroom experience, our students are coming to us at different places. And you expect like a type of student, like student A, which may be kind of coming to fourth grade at the appropriate level and then moving throughout the year to get to the fifth grade level, so that they're ready when the next grade level starts over to take on that fifth grade content. We also know that there are other groups of students that come to us that are potentially lower than grade level, and there's additional things that we need to do with those students to make sure that we are able to move them up to grade level. We know if we keep going with the status quo, keep going with what has been done, perhaps the students will be permanently left behind, and we don't have an opportunity to kind of shift that slope for them to move up. Also acknowledge any high school math references, math people in the crowd, please give some math jokes and some love there as a former math teacher and administrator. So there are a few ways that we know that research says that we can actually shift the slope of this line, or keep the slope standard or keep the slope equal to what it currently is, but still give those students an opportunity to catch up. One of the ways that we can do that is by offering more time. For example, if you're in a summer school setting, if a student's in a summer school setting, it gives them the opportunity to get more time to increase their learning, increase their ability to master the TEKS. More times, one of those strategies that we've seen a lot of folks employ. But in addition to that, we know that if you're actually trying to kind of shift that slope and get students back to grade level, there's a whole set of other strategies that research says, hey, these are working. What we've seen across the state, primarily folks making a lot of headway in, what we hear from y'all, we know that high quality instructional materials, strongly supported teachers, high impact tutoring, especially for a lot of folks on this call, are different ways that we can actually shift the slope and get those students back up to grade level, so that we can make sure that they have the opportunity and access for college, career, or military when they're in high school and leaving our hands. So what I want to do is just kind of dig into each of this very quickly. For rigorous materials, instructional materials, we know that a lot of teachers spend a lot of time creating instructional materials, and on average, teachers report actually not being given enough time per day, per week to be able to develop their lesson plans. And what this leads to is a lot of teachers kind of pull in materials from different parts, different places that they can find, whether it's the district curriculum, whether it's somewhere else online, We know a lot of folks are going to Google, going to Pinterest, and what this could lead to is potentially a setting where, in kind of a national study, which you see on the left, a lot of materials just aren't at grade level. There's a study from the Opportunity Myth from New Teacher Project, where actually only 17% of lessons in this study that they ran were at grade level. We replicated this on a Texas basis at a small scale, albeit, and actually found similar results where roughly one in five lessons were on grade level. And so we know that our kids and our teachers are working hard, and we need to expose our kids to rigorous instructional materials in order to shift that slope for accelerated learning. One of the things that was passed in the 88th legislature was House Bill 1605, which is all things curriculum. Some of the main things that this added in was additional funding to some districts for SBOE approved materials, changed up the process of SBOE review on some materials, that required TA to develop some state-owned textbooks, which a lot of folks are familiar with the open education resources that we have at the agency, and also some pieces about teacher prep that it included as well. There will be additional information on HB 1605 over the course of the next few months. There's going to be a full webinar on it in winter of 2023, and we'll communicate those details to folks this fall. Also, there was I will point folks to, there's a recording at a SBOE session, I believe it was last 2 weeks ago, where we kind of outlined the entire bill, and you'll see kind of some workings of a working group that are involved there. So if folks want to learn a little bit more there, that is a place where you can go and watch the SBOE recording. And then there's additional kind of sources of information out there that folks can use, whether it's the TA HQIM webpage or reaching out to instructional.materials at ta.texas.gov. We know the second piece with regard to learning acceleration is strongly supported teachers. And we know from our experience and what research says that teacher is the single most important in-school factor relating to student outcomes. And so we want to make sure that we support our teachers as much as we can, both as a state and also we know in schools and districts across the state. One initiative that we have at TA that many folks on this call are familiar with is the teacher incentive allotment. The goal of the teacher incentive allotment is to support districts in building and sustaining teacher compensation systems that help us to recruit, reward, and retain the best teachers in the state. And so that's something that's available to folks to learn a little bit more about. In this model, essentially, teachers can make get up to a $32,000 kind of bump from their base salary if they hit this master designation level. Again, the designation system is all determined by y'all locally. TEA does a couple checks to make sure, hey, this is valid, hey, this is reliable, but largely districts determine what are the criteria that go into that. So teacher incentive allotment is an option for districts to be able to support their teachers as well. Comes with some additional TA support, which I'll point y'all to in a second. One note that I wanted to take here is, as you'll see, as Colby will go through here in a minute, a way that districts can actually satisfy accelerated instruction requirements for students is by placing them with a TIA designated teacher. If you look at the graph to the right, this graph shows the percentage of students that failed a particular test that the following year, they were placed with a TIA designated teacher. So we actually think these numbers are pretty low, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to say, hey, there's all this requirements about tutoring, but another option that we have as a state and as districts and as campuses is to place those students that failed a STAR test with a TIA designated teacher to fulfill those accelerated instruction requirements. We'll go into that a little bit more here in a minute, but I think that's less commonly known and something that I wanted to call out for this group. And of course, you can reach out to us at TIA@TEA.texas.gov to learn a little bit more about teacher incentive allotment. You can also go to the TIA website as well to learn more. In addition to that, we know that more time has an opportunity to give kids more access to high quality curriculum and instruction. In Texas, there is an initiative and a piece of statute that is called Additional Days School Year. And this is an opportunity that actually funds districts funds campuses to extend their school year. I will caveat, this doesn't kick in till day 180 of a campus calendar. And we know many district calendars are actually shorter than that, or campus calendars are shorter than that. So I give that a caveat. It may not be appropriate for everybody, but we've seen is a lot of districts that are tapping into ADSI funding for days 180. It's good for an additional 30 days. So actually a lot of districts that have increased their campus calendars to 210 days. And through that, they're actually drawing down additional funds. So potentially about 25, depending on your district, $25 extra per half day of instruction that can lead to pretty significant funding infusions for your district. And it works for kids. What you'll see on this slide is two graphs, if I can orient you to them. One is math on the left, the other on the right is reading. You will see the orange line, which is essentially statewide change in students passing STAR. What you'll see in blue is that same metric, but for campuses that were drawing down ADSI days. So essentially what this shows is the slope from the blue line, the ADSI campuses, is outpacing pretty significantly the slope of the state. Didn't fully catch up to the state. They started in a lower place, but the slope of that line is pretty significant. And so definitely encourage folks to look into additional days school year as an option for increasing time. If you do want to learn more about that, you can go to our webpage, learn about ADSI, or reach out to the ADSI team at adsi@tea.texas.gov. I will go ahead and throw it over to my teammate, Colby. I know that was a lot. All of this information will be posted after the webinar, and including the slides as well. And I'll throw it over to Colby.
Thanks. Andrew kind of reviewed the foundational pieces of accelerated instruction. And as we've been talking about, even under House Bill 4545, we do promote the best practices, also known commonly as high impact tutoring. So evidence-based practices at a national level, there's been several research studies before this became probably better known in Texas, that talked about the components of high impact tutoring and the impact it can have. Some of the components mentioned previously, and if you're new, just to keep in mind, the importance of a well-trained and consistent tutor has been shown to have a high impact. High quality instructional materials, I know Andrew touched on that, the importance of selecting or getting the best materials you can. One-on-one or small group, 1 to 3, 1 to 4 even has been shown to be effective. There are some considerations for who the tutor is. If you have a certified teacher, 1 to 4 in experience can be beneficial, but if you are a new volunteer to tutoring, depending on the capability of that tutor, those need to be considerations. As always, if you can embed the tutoring session in the school day, absent from removing a student from Tier 1 instruction, which creates further gaps, we want to be sure that we're providing opportunity where transportation and additional, extending the school day is not an obstacle to deliver that. At least 3 sessions per week, that consistency of at least 30 minutes, and it's data driven. We're not just setting the tutoring session and letting it go and then assessing at a later date, but we're progress monitoring, getting those formative numbers and cues to best impact the tutoring and go from there. So moving on to the next slide. Andrew mentioned some of the growth and progress, and if we look at students for reading and math before the pandemic and after, we have seen increased progress overall. Obviously, in this chart, we've seen a 13% growth for reading and a smaller percentage for math. But looking at this anonymized case study, you can see, and there's been many cases provided by LEAs in our ESC visits and otherwise, that the effective implementation of accelerated instruction can really push a student forward and get them caught up. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the just-in-time instruction here in a minute. We can go on to the next one. Many of you, I've been out at the regional service centers and gone to several conferences and may have heard Susie Pepper Rollins come and talk about acceleration versus remediation. This is, in my 9 years as a principal, this came in the last few years of my tenure as a principal, when we started talking more about this concept as opposed to a remediation type approach through our RTI or MTSS structures. So remediation is often focusing on drilling students on an isolated skill, whereas accelerated instruction is strategically preparing the student for this just in time to maximize their classroom experience overall, and also not create gaps. One thing that we talked about in my role as a principal was we definitely don't want to see any of these types of interventions as a lifelong sentence for a student or for the career, their education career. So looking at the data is important to be able to move students in and out. And of course, we'll talk a bit about the impacts with 1416 here shortly. Moving on, just looking at the instructional materials and what must be aligned and what must be changed with our approach moving forward. I think this is an animation. We'll click to the next slide. So here are two different approaches. The traditional remediation approach, like I said, in some instances, prior remediation would remove a student from their existing tier 1 instruction to target prerequisite skills or gaps that they are missing, causing future gaps, and then delaying or not allowing the student to reach or receive the full instruction for that grade level. The systematic approach for the needed acceleration for just-in-time intervention helps alleviate that and accelerate the student moving forward on that. Some of the key accelerated components, this could be a checklist if you're looking at what goes in to make a solid accelerated learning process, prioritizing the most critical prerequisite skills, being sure you know where the student has unfinished learning. That's key. Those diagnostics and formative assessments are important. Integrate the just-in-time lessons so it's not a semester or year-long program that's working only just a handful of skills, but gives that just-in-time instruction to help scaffold and support the students. Has an adaptive schedule to make sure there's ample time. If you are asking your teachers to fill this role, are you giving them time to plan and prep as well as move on with that? Train the teachers well, and of course, as we said, monitor your student progress. So moving on. We do have accelerated instruction requirements, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The requirements come in previously under House Bill 4545, but most recently on the next slide, we're going to talk about House Bill 1416, which came out in the 88th regular session. As Andrew mentioned, there's two options to satisfy this for students that did not perform satisfactorily on a STAR test. You can assign that student to a TIA designated teacher, and information earlier in the slides can give you insight into that. And also, or the other option is provide the targeted instruction in TEKS, no less than 15 or 30 hours. And we have some criteria in our FAQ that will delineate that, but based on how the student performed. A change we'll highlight here in a minute is it does limit it to 2 subjects per year, prioritizing math and reading language arts. The ratios are 4 to 1. So again, looking at your groups, looking at your tutors and their capability, and also designed to assist the student in achieving that satisfactory performance by using the effective instructional materials. And most importantly, a person trained in the instructional materials for the delivery. So some of the highlighted changes is eliminating the accelerated learning committee requirements. We had those, and these changes are coming by obviously legislative action, but as we went around and visited ESCs and LEAs, we listened to the various feedback we were getting. We looked at best practices and research, and many of these changes come out of that, of course, legislative action on that. So limiting the tutoring to 2 subjects, as I mentioned before, and reduce the minimum hour requirements from 30 to 15 for some students, as defined in our FAQ and later on in a commissioner rule. Increase the ratio, added LEAs receiving compensatory education funds. Previously, it was based on ESSER and American Rescue Plan funding that made this a requirement, but now LEAs that are receiving state compensatory education funds are required to provide the instruction. There is a provision to look at online curriculum as an option. We'll have some feedback on that and input coming in the spring of 2024. Does clarify the parent opt-out letter, clarifies parents also must be notified of a failure. And then for special education, students that receive special education services are primarily address accelerated instruction as their peers, gen ed peers are addressed there. And there's not a requirement to necessarily have a ARD convening to address it. It can be part of the next annual ARD on that. So moving on to a FAQ deep dive. The FAQ is posted to the webpage, and we're going to dig into that here in a minute. But there's some updated guidance that's been provided on IPI, intensive programs of instruction and personal graduation plans. There is a PDF there that's linked, and it's also hosted on the webpage it's hosted on is linked there. The second updated is there was example of an optional assessment administration. There was some questions that came of the original FAQ. We decided to add some clarification to that. And that's dealing with TEA required assessments, with the idea that if a student takes an EOC in May and then takes it again in June and December, the same EOC, due to not performing satisfactorily, they don't continue to accumulate hours within that year period. We are going to provide some additional guidance with some solid examples, not included in this FAQ, but will be shared out shortly in the next coming weeks. The new questions that we're focusing on is the discussion about 15 or 30 hours for science and social studies assessments, which we currently do not have. Low does not mean and high does not mean categories, but there is a discussion, a provision. There will be some publications. The data file will be available starting the 21st, so not this Friday, but next Friday and beyond 2023. The data files will be available as part of the standard reporting timelines there as well. The other question that we're also getting is, what about the eligibility for a waiver for LEAs that have been able to move at least 60% of their students that did not approach as grade level the preceding year to approaches the next. The statute also does talk about the need to determine overrepresentation of certain subgroups. So special education, educationally disadvantaged students, these have to be defined in rule before any type of list or potential waivers could be granted for that. So that is something that we're working on, and rulemaking should be concluded the fall and hopefully spring. The target for spring 2024 is a target date for releasing that information. All right. Want to just highlight some supports that are available currently under TEA's existing instructional materials. Andrew touched on those, but going on, we do have some supplemental curriculum licenses that are available. These licenses are providing online learning tools, again, to supplement Tier 1 instruction. They can be used to meet accelerated instruction requirements. Granted, there has to be the appropriate ratios and whatnot to meet the other criteria, and trained staff to facilitate that. And that we have seen proven results with students meeting usage standards. So as we move forward to talk about those, you probably are familiar or maybe somewhat, and we'll move to the next slide, Andrew, I'm sorry. With ST Math, again, there's differentiated access to through challenging puzzles. Our teams have been able to interact with ST Math quite a bit. Very interesting, very novel concepts. There's not any text, so it's just interacting to complete math puzzles and supporting that development of specific areas. And with Zern as well, Zern is currently a subsidized provider, and we've seen some great progress with Zern. Again, the key is the usage fidelity that we're seeing with that. On to the next slide. So some initial quasi-experimental studies, with fidelity use for Zern, they've seen growth up to, considerable percentage more in the blue, 18 plus 18% plus 22 plus 15 versus students that have not used Zern at all. So this will be updated, of course, as the new STAR data is published, and we'll update the information for y'all in the near future on this. Moving on to ST Math, similar progress with implementation, meeting the minimum level of fidelity usage. We want to see that consistent use and implementation to see the results with that. And then Amplify in-class and intervention. Many of you are familiar probably with Amplify Reading, also called Boost, I believe now. But we do have an Amplify intervention with M-Class as a subsidized provider. And we've seen students have significant growth with that, again, using it with fidelity over time. So some great resources that are currently available. And we'll talk a little bit about, if you want to access, there are some potential opportunities for you to join waitlist and look at, implementing some of these products before the current contracts are ending. So if you're interested in ST Math, just a plug, there's a sign up at stmath.com, Texas. For Zern or Amplify, we ask that you email texastutoring@tea.texas.gov. We do have contracts or licenses available through August of 2024. We can't guarantee that we'll have licenses for you, but we definitely can add you to our waiting list and consider, adding those for you through reaching out and providing some additional processes. Currently D6 and D11 through T-Class or Decision 6 tutoring and D11 after school are using Amplify and Zern to help support in part their after school. In some cases, they don't always use all of them, but they've really helped support the implementation of accelerated instruction. All right. So I'm going to transition to a website walkthrough, just kind of a high level overview. Many of y'all probably have not seen the web page. We did migrate our accelerated instruction web page over. Just as a side note, our Texas tutoring page is still up, but over the next few weeks, we will be consolidating that with our accelerated instruction page. The Texas tutoring page, just as we won't go over that today, but it has some of the high impact tutoring resources, the toolkit, and some of the previous webinars on how to implement high impact tutoring overall. So we'll definitely migrate that and make it make sense for you, so you can go to one area and have all the resources at your fingertips. We also have some additional guidance and implementation supports, which I'm going to go through here as we navigate the page here. So
we just wanted to answer just a few. I see a lot of questions in chat about some of these supplemental curriculum licenses. So I'll just answer a few things before we move on. There is information about this that Colby's going to go over, and also on the webpage and in the FAQ as well. So I will note that all these supplemental curriculum licenses, these are the same contracts that the state used with some of the ESSER funding around like T-Class and some of the that additional discretionary funding that we had to be able to provide these as a resource. So see some questions about extension of contracts with these licenses. We're not able to extend those contracts because it was ESSER funds and they had some strict deadlines associated with that. We are looking at other ways that we can help support folks through kind of some supplemental online curriculum. I would encourage folks to look at opportunities that might come up through LASSO, the Learning Acceleration Support Opportunities, kind of one app grant program that'll happen this fall. Hope that you'll be able to get some helpful resources within that. We'll also note that, a lot of people are like, hey, this seems great, but what about high school? What about this subject? And so we'll note that if in a perfect world, we'd be able to support specific online curriculum for the state that is, all grade level, all subject areas. We had limited resources with some of the ESSER funding, and so made the decision around K-8, RLA, and math. And so both the two that y'all saw around ST Math and Zern, I think those were all K-8, although our license for ST Mathis statewide was only K-5. So I will say that what we're trying to do here is make sure that we're thinking about all the resources that we have, all the resources that we have as an agency to turn over to y'all. We didn't get appropriated funds to support districts directly with HB 1416. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of the resources that we have that are available to folks, but also we'll acknowledge that there's more that folks would want as well. I also see folks are getting an alert that says the accelerated instruction web page is not found. So I'll go back and look at the link and I will repost that in the chat. So thanks for the information. Turn it back to you, Coley.
Thanks, Andrew. Are you able to see the web page currently? All right, good deal. Yeah, apologize if there's some technical issues, especially with the PowerPoint. We'll ensure that those links are fixed prior to posting, and we'll be posting everything on this page. I know there's a lot of questions about, hey, where can I find this PowerPoint or the recording for the webinar? It'll be posted here, so you're able to share it throughout your LEA or reference things at a later time. This is our Accelerated Learning Supports webpage. It was came out last month. A commissioner went over a part of the superintendent call, but for most of you or many of you, these are new, first time to view this. So we're going to take some time to go through here and talk about some of the different components, what's available and whatnot. So we're going to scroll down. Just to orient you, you may have come here to sign up for the webinar. We'll post again the recording in a prominent place. Gives an overview of high impact tutoring and student outcomes, some of the research behind that's very relevant, and even some Texas-based testimonials about how high impact tutoring has promoted and accelerated their students here in Greenville ISD as an example. Again, the requirements, and this is captured in the slide on the slide deck as well, and the key changes here. Plus, we also have some supporting documents down here. So going down to the resources is probably where you're going to navigate the most. We do have the frequently asked questions, extremely popular, of course. We're going to come back to that and look at that a little bit more deeply. But we're also going to look at what has changed. So there's some resources that are new today, and they're noted by the published date. Others were posted on June 15th. But as you click in, what has changed from 4545 to 1416, it gives you a one-pager that just kind of overall and highlights that. Also, if you're interested in the statute, very beneficial. There's an enrolled version, which is the final version of 1416 that you can look at and reference if needed. That's always helpful to have bookmarked there as well. So moving on, the accelerated instruction one-pager, again, this came out on the 15th. This is a summary. This will be good just to update staff as you're doing back to school PDs. You have parents that are interested, feel free to share this information out. Talks about the accelerated instruction requirements, the TIA designation, and the hours and how those are allocated. It also gives our resources, accelerated instruction webpage, and the email, which we'll share a little bit later if there are specific questions. We get a lot of general questions, but there's also some unique situations. I would encourage you, if you have a specific, unique, no question that's like a one-off, please send it to us. And if we're getting a lot of the same questions, we will consider, adding that to our FAQ as one of these frequently asked questions that we feel like the field is seeking answers to. So just overview for that. Andrew, do you have anything before we move into the FAQ a little more? Did you have anything to add to these resources?
No, I think given the questions in the chat, I think it just might be helpful to walk through some of the questions that are in the FAQ. I think specifically some around parent opt-outs, low does not meet, high does not meet. Looks like those are some interesting ones for folks. And then if we could spend a little time on some special education specific ones as well. But folks, I also dropped the link to the FAQ in the chat for you to kind of follow along at home and do a Control F to see if there's the answer to your specific questions in there as well.
Yeah, just a reminder, this is a searchable PDF. Control F is your friend. We even use it as a team to find specific terms and questions here for that. As we develop out the FAQ, we will look at possibly providing more of an indexing and categorization. So these may change from version to version, but for the most part, we try to keep it the same. Again, just starting out with some general questions. These were similar questions and carryover that we had for House Bill 4545. So adapted in reflecting the current changes from the 88th regular session. Again, outlining the options that are available for the accelerated instruction for STAR tested grades. The supports that are available, again, the website is linked here, as well as the email address. And here's probably the first question about the parent modifier opt-out. And it outlines the criteria for that. So essentially, if a student did not perform satisfactorily on a STAR test, there is a provision for the parent to submit documentation to opt their student out of part or all of the accelerated instruction. The thing to raise here is that if the student did not have a STAR test, for some reason they missed the test or did not have a score for a test, there is a beginning of the year assessment that's given. And we go into that a little bit deeper later in the FAQ. Just again, who didn't receive a STAR score. The LEA, waiving the ratio requirements, it does talk about that. So in lieu of a 4-to-1 ratio, parents can commit to a waiver, but every parent of every student in that group would have to submit to a waiver of the greater than a 4-to-1 ratio for that. These were highlighted earlier on the FAQ, the highlights of the FAQ, the PDF or document, as well as the web page that hosts the information. I'll just click into this real quick to go through. It talks more in detail the guidance associated with PGP and IPIs as well. And we do have definitely our support team with special education here. So if you have a specific question regarding this, if you'll put that in the Q&A, we may have a chance to dig deeper into that. And moving on, just note, as we update questions, we'll flag them. That means it's been previously posted, but there's new information and revisions made to that. Just to highlight something about data collecting and monitoring, which was a provision that wasn't in the previous 4545 bill, is we're looking at providing for this school year information for TREX. Something we'd hear from registrars, including my wife being a former registrar, was, hey, we're getting students transferring from district to district. We don't know where they are, in their accelerated instruction. Now there's components about parent waivers, what's there. So we're putting that in place to help with that transfer process. So look forward to that information coming out, and ultimately looking at PEIMS coding, looking in the summer submission of 24-25. It's currently under development to capture what was assigned, what was delivered, including TI teacher placement, which we talked about. So some of those considerations will be there to for your PEIMS submission with that. Just to hit some highlights, I don't want to go through all of these. Some of these are very familiar. They've been with a 4545. Just talks about the subjects and the grade reporting and how to, during this time when we don't have the full results, the early release of the zone of uncertainty scores and what have you. Just moving down, the 15 versus 30 hours, the low does not meet. I talked about this, but here's the notation in writing. Looking for next Friday, the 21st, to provide additional information, and then future data files will give you the low does not meet and high does not meet criteria for the 15 and 30-hour determination for the science and social study tests.
Well, we have quite a bit of questions about the STAR reporting, and acknowledge for folks this makes this incredibly challenging to be planning for these accelerated instruction requirements. The timeline doesn't. So if you don't mind, can we go back up to the STAR reporting FAQ? So essentially what the guide that we know a lot of folks are kind of in. Oop, I think we're a little bit past it. Yep. Little bit more. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. So what we have linked in here, that's what I wanted to call out is two things. One is we know there's the zone of uncertainty guidance within the early results guidance tables that can help folks with planning for these requirements. Again, acknowledging that it's not full information. That's, I think, the nature of having a different test system. And so I'll acknowledge that it's not going to be fully satisfying there, but that is a way that we've seen districts already be planning for this. I'll also highlight that reporting timelines document that's in there. This is just pulled from our webpage. If you want to even just Google reporting timelines for STAR, it'll pop up. I see a lot of questions in the chat about when are we going to know scores. And so you'll actually be able to find that within this document. I found it as a pretty helpful tool to be able to communicate with folks about. And then do want to be clear, if you can drop down to the high does not meet, low does not meet question. So that information I believe is available now for EOCs. For folks to be able to look into that to understand the difference between 30 and 15 hours. And that information will be coming on that STAR reporting timeline for the 3 through 8 STAR test.
Thanks, Andrew, on that, and thanks for monitoring the questions. And so we can definitely spend some more time if available to help dig a little bit deeper. The question came up about the optional assessment administration. Again, under 1416, the problem of practice was a student would take an EOC in May, and then they would attempt it in June, and then later in December. Well, under prior statute, a student could accumulate 30, 60, 90 hours in a very short period of time. So what the provision of 1416 allows for is for that the additional what they're considering optional assessment administrations do not penalize a student for attempting those tests. And again, we have some scenarios regarding the EOCs, which are different in how they're structured, and that students actually are retesting, that will roll out in the next coming weeks. That'll hopefully help clarify some of those scenarios that we've been getting questions about specifically. More information about the accelerated education plans.
Colby, do you mind actually, sorry, just before we go on to that one, I'm still seeing some questions in the chat about the low does not meet, high does not meet. Can you elaborate on how districts are using the zone of uncertainty to plan for interventions? And so the zone of uncertainty is just guidance, right? So you don't have requirements to provide services to students that fall within the zone of uncertainty. You will have requirements to provide accelerated instruction to students that do not meet on STAR, right? So a lot of what we're hearing from a lot of districts is they're essentially using that zone of uncertainty and being as conservative as possible in terms of their planning for next year, and thinking that I think it's wise for folks to think about, okay, most conservative scenario when you're thinking about potentially 30 hours for anybody that might be in the zone of uncertainty, ensuring that those students might have a need to get all those hours, making sure that's in the master schedule. So a lot of those students, we've heard from districts are in summer school now or back in June. And so folks are kind of taking that conservative approach. If there is some uncertainty with where a student is ultimately going to land, either in the low does not meet, high does not meet on the time frame. We also, it's in the statute that we have to put this in rule. So we're actually going to put this in education rule and the administrative rule, and that'll be happening later this year. What we didn't want to do is do that without giving folks guidance of this is what the language that we're proposing to put in the rule is. And so I wanted to make sure that you all had that up front for planning purposes, but also acknowledge that it's still not full information, which is, I think, just the nature of the situation that we're in right now.
Thank you, Andrew. And as questions come up, as you explore these resources, everybody's in a different spot with where they've digested a lot of the new information. So definitely we can point you in direction, and if we need to, reconvene at a later time to answer some more of these questions and walk through some more of the resources, we definitely can do that as well. So just overall FAQs flagged for new questions. Most of this will all be new to y'all, some familiarity if you interacted with House Bill 4545 FAQ overall, but just trying to categorize the FAQ so you can quickly find what you need. Again, Control F, Control Find, keywords or topics are there as well. If you have any questions, again, you can visit the Accelerated Instruction website. If you feel like a FAQ is not clarified enough, we encourage that feedback as well. It makes sense to us, but it needs to make sense to everyone. So if we need to elaborate more, provide additional resources, shoot us an email. We're constantly looking at iterations, improving and clarifying if needed on the FAQ.
A couple of things I'll add before we move on. So one is kind of more technical in nature. Within the bill, there's a provision that if like TEA essentially has to approve online curriculum, and if a district uses an online curriculum, then they can waive the ratio for accelerated instruction requirements. To go through what we talked about earlier is those licenses that we have access to. That's just like extra that we have from semester funding that we're proposing, like, hey, you should use these if you think that we're helpful. That is separate from this conversation around TEA approving online curriculum in order to waive the 30-hour, or sorry, the 4-to-1 ratio requirement. To effectively approve any online curriculum, as you all know, they've done the curriculum reviews in districts, that just takes more time. And so that's something that we will not have available for this academic year. It's something that we're beginning to work on now, and we will make that process clear through rulemaking. But we expect to name that list in the spring for 24-25 planning. The other thing that I wanted to call out here is this question that is number 10 here. So there's a provision in the bill that says essentially, if a district moved 60% of their students from does not meets to meets in a previous year, they can potentially get a waiver for the following year for accelerated instructional requirements. The reason I say potentially get is because there is a caveat there, which is 60% of students and no, quote, overrepresentation of student subgroups like students receiving special education services, those who are educationally disadvantaged. We actually have to work to get clarity on what overrepresented is, and so we will be doing that through the rulemaking process. So this is an option that is not available right now for districts, but know that that is a process that our team is taking on right now.
All right. We're going to navigate back to the Accelerated Instruction webpage. There's some additional resources I want to highlight. We have about less than 10 minutes remaining. But again, just the resources are available here. We've highlighted that. We won't dig into it, but we do have some best practices of high impact tutoring, top performing LEAs. We did some panel discussions with LEAs that had moved students forward under 4545 and implementation of their high impact tutoring. There's some common strategies that are, aligned and supports there. We do have the master scheduling support deck that we've previously had presented and authorized, has been adapted for 14-16 on how to, work on embedding the instructional time during the day where possible. Further down, we do have some example schedules that you could look at from rural, large city, and urban schools that you can look at and see if it's something you'd be interested in, but also reach out. And as Andrew said, we're always looking for resources from the field of what's working and what's not. A lot of times we're able to share those, or at least point other districts in direction of practices that have been working for similar size districts or similar conditions with that. We do have the TEAA posted that was again rolled out on the 15th as well. Getting down into some templates and tools that we've developed for you. We did post those in Word, so you're able to take those and edit those as needed. Again, the accelerated education plan is required, but you're not necessarily, you're not required to use this exact template. Some districts have specific systems where they house the information or the checklist and so on here. So I'll just click into this real quick and this document can be used to be filled out as part of the development of the plan. Just has the high yield strategies to capture the information and share out. We do provide that in English and Spanish. So again, this could be adapted to specific district information that y'all need to add, or can be integrated into the systems y'all have already set up as well. We do have a one-pager. This is a PDF that's informational that can be used to explain to staff or parents what is an accelerated education plan, who's it for, and what are the components we're looking at to develop that, so that we definitely promote that communication and understanding to help support our students moving forward with that. The other things that we have is there is a requirement statutorily for a parent notification letter about students' performance. We did provide that in Word. Again, this is not a template that you're required to use, but the notification letter is a requirement. So that's available for you again in Word. You can place that on specific letterhead. You can add specific language that meets the needs of your district about additional meeting times or additional opportunities for the community to come and learn more about it and the process. So we just wanted to provide those as were requested. And again, as mentioned before, if you have examples of trackers, if you have examples of things that have worked well for you in the past, or you've adapted for House Bill 1416 implementation, we definitely would like to see those, and definitely be aware of what's available there.
Well, again, as you go into this, just respond to a couple of questions in the chat. So just want to be super clear here that these tools, templates, what have you here are, except for the legal stuff, like all this is optional. Like anything that you see here that you may find useful, if you do, please use it. Adapt it as you see fit to meet your local needs. If you don't find it useful, please don't use it. There's some other questions about sample opt-out letters. That's something I think if districts start creating and want to send it in, please do so, and we can look at posting those on the page as well. If you look at the statute and the FAQ, it's essentially parents have to send an opt-out letter, like a letter indicating they're opting out. So we can provide a template, but it's literally like, dear campus, I want to opt out my student of the requirements is a satisfactory way to for a parent to opt out of those requirements. Thanks, Colby.
Yeah, Andrew, and just before we navigate away from this page, just know we'll keep this updated. New FAQs will be updated here, and we'll be sure that the dates are indicated so you can refresh and bookmark it. Just know another common problem is if you do bookmark it, sometimes you have to clean out your cache so it does update. Otherwise, you'll continue to get the previous version with that. So that's one of those tech tips of the day for that. We're going to navigate back to the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing here, Andrew. We do have about 3 more minutes remaining. There's some final information I'd like to share with you, and we would like to get some feedback from you about the presentation today, and it helps guide our future events and future topics that we discover discover are needed. We can go into further depth and detail as needed on that. And also the again, reposition the contact information for if you need to send that out. So
Colby, I'm gonna actually post the contact information in the chat, and in addition, I'll drop the exit ticket in there right now. Would love to know, we don't have a ton of time, but for folks that are the TA folks on the call to be able to respond to some of the questions that are still remaining. We've answered a lot of questions so far, but just want to make sure that folks do have an opportunity to get those answered. So if there are TA folks that can answer some of these, please do so. I'll drop the exit ticket and our email address in the chat.
Thank you. And our goal is to have this posted possibly by the end of the day, but definitely target by Friday on the website if you would like to review it, as well as with the presentation. We'll definitely fix any broken links that may have occurred there. Thanks, Andrew, Issa, for posting that information there as well.
It's some really good feedback around posting the Q&A. So what I'll actually propose is if you let our team kind of summarize some of this, and we'll throw it back in our FAQ. There's about 295 questions that have gone there, and a lot of them are repetitive. And so we'll take the questions that are in there that are most relevant to folks, make sure they're in the FAQ. But I do agree, it's a great thought to make sure that folks can have a shared learning experience as well.
Definitely, we're going to reconcile that, and many of them are probably answered in the current FAQ, but if they're not, definitely considerations for future messages there.
Had a request for the webpage again. Drop that in the chat. You do see the exit ticket in there. Please, y'all, feedback is a gift, and hope y'all see it and improvements. Seen some really nice things in the chat about just some improvements from the team in the past, and just the only way that we get better is collectively with your help. And so please, if you do have a few minutes later today, fill out that exit ticket. Let us know what we can do to better support y'all implementing this in the field. I do know we are at time. I am happy to stay over a little longer and just dig into the chat and the Q&A just to make sure folks get answers that you need. Seeing a few questions, and I think Kristen, especially with a special pops lens, if there's any you want to call out to the full group, please do so. And Colby, just looking at them as well. See questions about third graders having to complete all 30 hours. Yes, so effectively, if you're for your third graders, you're not going to know if a student does not meet, or sorry, for having third graders, you're not going to have that does not meet the accelerated education plan for 2 years. You're not going to have a previous year's set of data for those students. So all third graders that fail are required to have those 30 hours. See some question about summer learning. This is something that is important to highlight. There's a concept of banking hours. Folks that are going through summer programs, for example, if you have a student that you don't know for sure if they will require 30 hours, 15 hours, any hours for accelerated instruction. What happens if they're in summer now, or what happens if they're getting some good high impact tutoring before you get those results? Those are all what we call banked. Like y'all should definitely be banking those hours, and folks get credit for that as well.
Andrew, just to reiterate some questions about the supplemental licenses that are available currently through Amplify, Zern, and ST Math. Those are available at no cost to LEAs. We do have limited availability, and ST Math, the licenses will end in December of this year, and Amplify and Zern will go until August of next year. So we have about a year, 1 school year left for Amplify and Zern, and ST Math is approximately a semester on that.
There's kind of the process to get access to those programs that's included in one of the slides that we showed. I'll put it back up just if folks want to screenshot it. It'll also be posted in the deck when we share it with y'all. Give me 1 second, please. Should be up now. This is kind of the process to sign up for each of those. The ST Math is a statewide license, so effectively anybody in the state who wants it, even if it's like for your student, like your person, like my child, like could get access to this. You could just go to stmath.com/Texas and sign up with their team. They'll help you through all the rostering and get you set up with training, etc. I mentioned this earlier in one of the Q&As, but the Zern and Amplify ones, those were more constricted licenses. We had to we could only buy a certain amount of licenses with the funding that we had. And so we just have to make sure that there are enough licenses to be able to give out to folks. There's a question about parent opt-outs and whether or not a district could initiate the request. That's actually explicitly called out in the law that that a district or campus cannot encourage a parent to opt out. So that is something that the parent must initiate. Kristen, if you're still on, so we do have a couple of special TOPS related questions. So there's one: can the ARD committee determine if a student does not have to participate in accelerated instruction? Do you know the answer to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to keep up, but essentially the statute says that the ARD committee is not required to meet, but again, it does say that, you know, obviously that the ARD committee can choose to. So if the ARD committee believes that participation in accelerated instruction may be, you know, may impact the student's provision of FAPE, which of course is what's required under statute, then, you know, that could be an instance where the ARD committee meets and determines, you know, modifications to accelerated instruction, including potentially removing that requirement. There was also a question about opt-out and who the parent submits that to, you know, at least within the statute itself, again, because, you know, students with IEPs will be handled within the same procedures as all of their students. A parent, you know, could very well submit that opt-out to just as regular channels as any other student, however the campus decides that to happen. So I would anticipate that happening. But again, a parent may, just by, you know, habit of knowing their team, also, you know, ask their, you know, their SPED teacher contact or their tracking teacher or their ARD facilitator to hold a meeting. If it's because of that reason to opt out, then that could potentially be done out, you know, without an ARD, because that's an option for any other student. So I would say, you know, default is the same way as all other students, but you likely will get, you know, questions through the SPED channels from a parent of, hey, I want to schedule an ARD to opt out. You just have to get used to kind of the process of that is a parent right, absent going to ARD committee.
Thanks, Kristen. See a few other questions in the chat. One is around, is there a TA template to track hours? Actually, let me level up this one and answer a couple of questions here. There's a question about TREX, so transfer reporting. Colby, can you actually give us just like a quick 30-second overview of what's happening, like the authority that we were granted, and then what's happening with TREX and high-level timeline?
Definitely. We're working with our data team, actually meeting again today to discuss the components that need to be included with TREX and the ability to just communicate. The problem of practice here is we had students that were going to DAPs and being, you know, co-op DAPs and outside the district, and it was difficult to get records. Registrars were saying they had, and administrators were saying they had difficulty getting records on where the student was in their accelerated instruction hours, if they'd received anything or not, and go from there. So part of that is developing the TREX criteria, which will give an avenue to even upload information as needed, but to say where the student is, what they were receiving accelerated instruction for. Remember, we have the 2 subjects this year, so math and reading is priority, but if it's math and another subject or reading in another subject, and what the progress has been made up until that point. So just to help assist that, again, it's being developed with our data team. On the other hand, the PEIMS code as well. So we're looking at, there will be some similar data required for the PEIMS code submission, and that's part of our monitoring authority granted to us through statute. So both those areas were part of the statute to better assist us having insight to what's going on, but also better assist you in communication across LEAs.
That's right. And so that's why I wanted to bring it to that level, because I think that the point here, what actually happens is we work with our data team, update TREX, update PEIMS, but then we work with your student information system vendors to make sure that they're actually building that into their system. So there's a few questions in here about tracking, transfer reporting. our goal here is that this is something that we can make as easy as possible for you by putting this on those vendors to make sure that they're building that into their systems. And so hopefully they have kind of the built-in tools to be able to communicate, or for y'all to be able to communicate both internally and externally in that way. And so that's know that that's happening this year. The question specifically around TA templates to track is something we've been asked for in the past. I think we could probably put something together, but we have seen, frankly, a lot of districts just go way simple on this and just create like a Google Sheets or Excel tracker, and that's what they use, and that's sufficient. Okay, folks, now there's a lot of questions in the chat, and also to know that this is something that will our team will still be communicating on over the course of time. Definitely encourage y'all to reach out to the email address, reach out through the website as well, or sorry, go to the website, look at the FAQs. We'll be updating those over the course of time. As we do update the FAQ, as we update some of the resources, this is something that we'll be communicating to y'all in a couple of ways. One is through to the administrator address letters. The other one is through the commissioner's monthly superintendent calls as well. So those are the primary ways in which we're going to be kind of pushing communications out to the field. But then also know that, again, when y'all have questions, please do reach out to our team so that we can make sure to get y'all the information that you need. Again, know that we didn't have time for all the questions. We have, I think, answered 342 or so now. I lost it, but appreciate y'all's time. Appreciate all the great questions, all the great feedback, both today but over the course of the past few years, and just appreciate what y'all do for students in Texas. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a wonderful rest of your July. Thanks, y'all.